Good morning and welcome to Navigating Complexity, the podcast where we have conversations with friends about life and the law and bring a little humanity to the practice of law. I am your host, Danielle Dudai, and I am the owner of Dudai Legal, a business law firm where we handle all manner of contracts, transactions, and litigation. Today on the podcast, we have a dear friend of mine, esteemed colleague, board-certified construction lawyer, Jared Gillman. Jared, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about today. So I always start with, why did you become a lawyer?
So the first easiest answer is my dad's a lawyer, so I've always been exposed to it. I've always kind of been aware of it. My dad he's a real estate and corporate lawyer, so not exactly the same thing, but definitely always been aware of being a lawyer as a job opportunity. The second part of it was, as we both know, I was graduated from in 2005. So going to law school during a financial meltdown seemed like a wonderful idea. So off I went.
Yeah, it was great on our part because I graduated the year after you
Right.
and ended up in law school. I started in 2007. So it was like just the right time. It's like, should have bought a house then instead of going to law school. But here I am. So I get it. So how do you describe what you do to a non-lawyer?
So virtually my entire practice is construction law. So I do both litigation and transactional construction work. So as far as the litigation goes, I always say that it all always starts the same way. So it's, somebody didn't pay somebody and they say, well, you screwed the job up anyways, and off you go. And then as far as the transactional part goes, people will come to me, hey, we want to build a house. We want to build a shopping center. We need to renovate this warehouse. Okay, great. So let's do the construction contracts to make sure that you're paying what you want to, you're getting paid at what you want to as far as the contractor goes, and that when the inevitable things pop up during a project, we have a contract that will tell us how to deal with them.
So do you represent like more the construction side in terms of the developers and the workers versus the homeowners, or like what does your client base look like?
So I really do everything kind of under the construction realm. So I represent, homeowners, developers, bigger GCs, custom home builders, electricians, plumbers, everything on the sub side, as well as design professionals. So I have architect and engineer clients, and really, I generally do everything from soup to nuts on a construction project.
Are there any categories of like workers or trades that you don't represent?
Sure. So I typically don't represent, laborers on a project. It's just a financial decision that it's hard to make the business case for that. Similarly, a lot of owners will come to me, and that leads to a lot of difficult conversations where when they've got a problem of a certain size that really is what most people would affect most people, it just doesn't necessarily make sense for me to get involved in the project.
Right, like some types of situations are, it's not that it's no damage, right? Because $10,000 is a lot of money to
Sure.
a lot of people, but sometimes with respect to the law and like pursuing a lawsuit, like $10,000 is not a lot of money. So I can see that like homeowners who have maybe that kind of issue wouldn't be the right fit.
Correct.
Yeah. So tell us about your career path, because I know you didn't wake up and just become a construction lawyer.
Yeah. So, it's been an interesting one. So straight out of law school, again, this was 2008. The world was kind of melting down. I went to the state attorney's office for my first 2 years out of law school. And that was a phenomenal experience. That was, for anyone who is in law school or trying to figure out what they're going to do, I can't recommend that enough, because you get to be in the courtroom, you get to learn how everything works, you get to try cases. I mean, in 2 years, I tried like 20 jury trials, which, that's certainly I don't know of a...
No, it's unheard of in civil practice.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you get that out of the way when you're up front, and it sets the foundation for the rest of your career. So after I left the state attorney's office, I went to a boutique construction law firm. I wasn't seeking out construction law. I knew that I wanted some type of, commercial law. I didn't want to go do PI, insurance defense, wills and none of that stuff really appealed to me, but something in the commercial world. And it was 2010. I just happened to find a firm in Jupiter that was, a little boutique construction law firm, and off I went.
What do you think was like the hardest thing, or maybe things that you had to learn going from being a prosecutor in criminal to being an associate in the construction law world? Like criminal has its own set of rules, and so does civil, but they have the same evidence code, right? So there's some similarity in terms of that. But like, how did you find the jump, and like, what were the challenges that you faced?
Sure. So, I actually feel like I did that jump twice, and it was really interesting. So when I was in law school, I had interned and clerked at a couple of civil firms, private practice, that whole thing. And so I kind of had an understanding for how the civil world worked. And I can remember I'd been at the state attorney's office for a couple of weeks. I needed to send, some sort of letter to an opposing counsel, which you don't. It just doesn't get done. But in my mind, with my prior civil experience, that's what needed to happen. And I can remember going out to my secretary at the state attorney's office and telling her to get a form for a letter ready for me. And she looked at me like I had three heads. So, okay, I guess that's not necessarily how things work. But, so learned that and how to get through that in the state attorney world. And then when I went back to private practice, one of the things I think that jumped out at me the most was how you live with cases and clients for years. I mean, it just, that's the way it works. When I was in a summer associate at different firms, you've got them for 3 months and that's it. Like that's the only amount of time you're there. When you are at the state attorney's office, as you know, like if there's a case you don't like, you plea it and you get rid of it and you move on.
Yeah.
You may not like your case in civil, but it doesn't matter because you're stuck with it. So that's probably one of the biggest changes.
Yeah, I could see that. That's the funny thing about civil is like some of these cases that just last 3 or 4 years. And when I was a prosecutor, the cases that lasted that long were like very far and few between. You plea out one, you get 30 the next day for arraignment. Not the case here. I think I would lose my mind if I got 30 new clients the following day after closing.
For sure.
I make sure that I have those boundaries. Like I am very good now this is the second time around with my firm about making sure I draw those boundaries. But I guess that leads into the next part of this, right? So we set boundaries as attorneys in order to be more efficient and also more productive with our clients. But what do you think is the best advice you ever got to help you get to where you are now?
I've picked up little bits and pieces along the way. And it's funny when you think back on these that, man, that's this person when I was a second-year lawyer told me this, and I still live by that. And then, oh man, I had this other lawyer teach me that. So, one of the biggest things, and I know you preach this, is providing value to your client. They don't really care, about the ticky-tack legal strategy that you're doing if it's going to cost them significantly more than what we're going to gain in the lawsuit. So it's how are we accomplishing the goal that the client has in the most efficient fashion? That's a huge thing for me. I had another lawyer who used to teach me, and this is when I was at my big law days. He had a great view on billable hours because everyone in big law is billable hours and billable hours and billable hours. Well, you can't feed your family with billable hours.
It's true.
So billing a file till you've got, if you don't collect on it,
right,
it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. No one asks how many hours you billed last year when you're a small lawyer. It's, you're looking at dollars that come in the door, and that's what matters.
Yeah, and you own your own firm also, and it's the same thing. Like you could bill $2 million, but if you don't collect any of it, it doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
I had a mentor that told me once, you can't go buy milk with billable hours.
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
It's true. Okay, did you ever get like a bad piece of advice?
I don't know that I got necessarily a bad piece of advice, but it's things that you've seen in that world of what not to do.
That's fair.
So as you know, having your own law firm, it's, you've always got to be out there doing some sort of marketing. You can never really rest on your laurels that the next thing's going to, come walk in the door. And that's really got to always drive you. That's always got to be in the back of your mind. So, I have seen different lawyers who, firms were busy, everything was great. And then they spend the next 6 months going back and forth to Europe and not really doing anything. And they don't necessarily see the immediate impact of that. It's all of a sudden when they get done with their European summer, and they come back, and 3 months later, everyone is really slow because the person who was, really the rainmaker of the firm decided to take 3 months off. And it takes a while to ramp that back up. So, you can't rest on your laurels. It's always a grind.
Yeah, so I think that's right. Like when you figure out what not to do is like watching people who do that, right? And they're just going to keep riding the wave thinking that it's going to continue. But we talked about this earlier before we started the taping, that in order to like really get your name out there, it's got to stay out there, right? You got to keep making yourself relevant. And it doesn't have to be in like a huge way. It doesn't have to be your name and face plastered on a billboard, right? Or like every commercial on TV.
Right.
But it's definitely got to be at least shaking hands and reminding people who you are.
That's right. That's exactly right. One of the pieces, again, like this is great advice that I've gotten through the years was always stay busy, right? So we have inevitable ebbs and flows with cases and your workload. And if you are slow, find something to do that's going to help your business. And whether that means you're working on your books, you're looking at your services and your contracts and what you're spending, or just pick up your phone and, I still call it this, but like go through your Rolodex and just call people out of the blue. Hey, just checking in, seeing how it's going. I think that a lot of lawyers, especially, solo lawyers or lawyers with small firms, you've got to put in those 40, 50-hour weeks every week. Just find something to do in that time. And I think that helps your business stay afloat.
No, I think that's really remarkable advice because it's true. When I first started my firm back in 2019, I would carve out time every Friday to like write blog posts or like do my books, check on the accounting because I wasn't so busy, right? And now, thank God, it's harder for me to do that because I am busy, but you got to keep staying on top of that, right? You got to always stay busy is great. I love the idea of like, you should still be working 40 hours, even if you don't have 40 hours worth of work,
right? Because
you do. It's on your business. Because especially as small firm owners, right? We're both true solos. We have to work on the rest of the business. Like someone has to do the admin and the billing and, all those things, which are not my favorite, but we got to do them, right? Because we got to do the work and we got to do that stuff. So I think that's phenomenal advice. Did you face any challenges as an associate? Like, for example, I've come across even women doing this to other women, but like sort of like, oh, there's a rite of passage where like it sucks for you and there's a struggle and you have to like earn the right to take a deposition of someone other than like the nurse custodian. Right. So did you ever face challenges like that? And how did it change you, throughout your career?
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone faces, different struggles as they come up through the ranks. I don't have as much of a problem with earning your stripes because again, like growing up in a lawyer household and that's kind of ingrained in me that, you've got to pay your dues. And I'm actually really okay with that. But I think you end up at different points where there's a disconnect or you have somebody who is proving a point just to prove a point. So, I can remember when I was at my first civil job and because I had courtroom experience, they immediately let me go to court and argue discovery motions and things like that, which was great. I mean, none of my peers in civil were doing that at that point. So again, that goes back to starting at the state attorney's office gives you this credibility to go do those kind of things.
Right.
But the senior associate who was busy drafting all of these discovery motions and, either he had been out of the courtroom for so long or he didn't understand that some of these ticky-tack issues were never going to fly at a 5-minute UMC. Like you were never going to be able to make the distinction that you needed to of why are we here in that short amount of time. So that was always difficult. But I definitely, again, I went to a bigger law firm after working in the boutique space. And there was a certain partner who was kind of that classic big law partner who just would create urgency when none existed. And again, if you've got to work late to get something done because something's got to get filed, great. I totally understand that. That is part of the world that we live in.
It is. It's a reality.
But, I can remember a specific time I was scheduled to be out of the office. I've got, my kids were young at that time. And it was a Friday, and I had them at Disney. And I can remember walking through Fantasyland and getting a phone call from this partner. I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and it needs to be done tomorrow. And it was a Friday. Well, are you sure? Like, I'm walking through Disney right now. It needs to be done tomorrow. Okay. And so, we were staying up there for the weekend, and I worked all night in the hotel room. Everyone's asleep, and I'm there by the glow of my laptop working through the night, and send it off to him on Saturday morning at 4 a.m, whatever it was. And I remember just kind of checking back in, and in our old document management system, you can see when stuff was open.
Yeah.
And he didn't look at it for 2 weeks. And so what was the point of that?
Right.
And it's just, that kind of flexing is what.
Yeah, that's so unnecessary. And it's not productive. And I agree with you. I definitely think that there's you got to earn your stripes.
Mm-hmm.
There is a level of struggle. You don't, just because even if you're a standout candidate from law school,
right,
you don't just get to be put first chair, arguing evidentiary hearings, conducting material depositions. I definitely think that there's the time to learn, and you need to learn, you need to observe. Sometimes you're going to lose time, right? Because you're going to sit and watch mediations or watch depositions, and you can't bill for that time.
Right.
But you need to do that to earn your stripes. And I agree with that. I've had experiences where even coming in as a junior partner, I was being treated like a first year associate.
Right.
And I'm like, this is unnecessary. And also as a woman treating me this way, wouldn't you want better? I strive to do that for any attorneys that I work with. I have a former associate. She started her own firm, and we work together on many things as co-counsel or of counsel. And I strive to do that for her. But I also remind her, sometimes there's going to be a struggle, and sometimes you don't have the skills and experience yet to do it. And it's not because we don't think that you have the ability to grow into that. Mm-hmm. It's just that you don't have it right now. And
right.
I can't have you depose the corporate representative when that's a material part of my case. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and this is some things that partners have done for me along the way, and I don't know if they had it done for them and it's just been passed down, but it really helps you learn, was, I never understood when I was a baby lawyer, when they would go and mark up something that I wrote, whether it was they would mark up bills and give them back, they would mark up motions that I wrote and give them back, and then make me make the changes. And I never understood, well, why can't you give it to the secretary? But you understand
why don't you
now,
just do it? Because it seems like it's extra work.
Correct.
Yeah.
But now I understand, no, that's how they were teaching me of this is how you do it. And, again, this goes back to, one of my first law firm job. We would get all of our bills printed and given to us.
Yeah, they called them pre-bills where I worked.
We'd get our pre-bills, and you would go and mark them up and see what you think, and then they would get them, and then they would go to the managing partner, because most of them were his clients, and then you would get back what he further marked up. And that was teaching you what you could bill, what you shouldn't bill, how a bill should look like, and what the entry should look like. And for those of you who are not familiar, what Jared and I are talking about is that the billing entries will be marked up or down by a partner saying no, you can't bill half an hour for this, or it's only, 0.1 or 0.2, or you tried to bill 2.5 hours for something and it needs to be split up. Right. So that type of thing. And I went through the same thing, and I never understood. I was like, if you marked it up, then you marked it up. But how was I ever going to learn what the language should say or what is, expected in terms of the time if I didn't do it myself? So you're right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's, we talk about providing value and all that. And at the end of the day, what we come back to is, your bills it's what you do.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing you do. So, your bills have to serve, a few different functions. And one of which is, that I've always heard, your bills should tell the story to the client of what you did and why you're entitled to get paid. So you don't want to have a bunch of legalese. You don't want to put a bunch of abbreviations that they're not going to know what they mean. It's, you are justifying why you're getting this bill. And, that's really important from the client perspective.
Yeah.
The other part of it is, I don't know if you've ever had to do it, but when you have a fee hearing,
What's a fee hearing?
so especially like in my area of law, construction law, there's a right to attorney's fees in when you lien a project and then you file suit, and when you ultimately win. So you get to the end and they say, yes, you're entitled to X dollars and you're also entitled to your attorney's fees. So at the end of it, you have an evidentiary hearing where you've got to present evidence of your rate. You've got to present evidence of what you did, and your fee records become the evidence. And if you ever have to defend your bills, so you've got another lawyer cross-examining you on your time entries, once you go through that once, you will never bill the same way again. You literally always look at it through a lens of, I'm going to have to defend this one day. I mean, you're sitting there, you're putting time in on a case, and it's years later that you're having this fee hearing. So of course, you're probably not going to have any independent recollection of what you did. Right. And you've got to be able to read those and go, yes,
I know this is.
This is what it was, and this is how much time it took. So
those vague entries that say like call with client.
Yeah.
What did you talk about for half an hour?
That's exactly right. And that, again, that goes back to, you've got to tell your client, why did I get billed for half an hour call? What did we talk about?
Right.
And so it's there explaining to them why the bill is what it is. It's there later for when you get questioned on cross-examination about what did you need to talk to them for. And the other part of it too, and this is part of every lawyer's life, is it becomes part of that CYA record. We've all had clients that you get into disagreements with, and it happens, but you want your fee records to be able to point back and say, see, this is what we talked about. And, when they say, oh, you didn't tell me that. Well, it's right here in the bill.
Or that I did do something. I did send an email to you saying this.
Right.
I did send the letter out. I had this happen the other day where I knew I sent a response to a records demand, and I double checked my billing and it's there, but I could not find it in my email system. And so thankfully I had CC'd my client on it, but Google, for all the great that it does, sometimes the email, I don't know what it's doing. It's like deleting random threads, and I couldn't find it.
Right.
And so I'm thankful that it's on the bill because I knew exactly where to look, what dates to look for. I was able to tell my client where to look for it. It was really helpful.
Right.
So you're right. It is a CYA, and it's also a CYA like in both directions.
Sure.
And it helps your client understand, even if you're going to write it down. And I do that too, right? I will list every conversation we've had, text messages, phone calls, emails, and then I'll go through and I'll give you a discount because that's my choice, right? Because maybe I don't feel that like it's $60 worth of value to you. Right. So I give you the discount, but you are going to see that it's on there, and you're going to see that I gave you the discount.
Well, that's exactly right. And I've had this discussion with a lot of other people where, if a client has an issue with a bill, and if you never put your write downs on there in the first place, it's really difficult to come to them and say, yeah, but I didn't charge you for A, B, C, and D when they've never seen it. So
you're right.
100% when you're keeping your time entries, again, and this goes to, it's a journal of what you did in the case. Yes, I did it, no charge. And it's on there so that they can see, the client understands, again, this is the value you're getting. I didn't charge you this month for 3 hours of work that was a 0.1 here, a 0.2 there.
Which adds up.
100% it does. And it's totally fine to write that time off, but you want your client to see that they were getting that value that they did not pay for.
So speaking about that, like what's your favorite thing about your practice?
My favorite thing. So,
and it doesn't have to be landmark or groundbreaking. For me, it's as simple as like, it gives me so much flexibility.
Right.
That it can't be beat.
Right. Well, so I really do like the practice of construction law. Out of everything that I've come across, it's something that I truly do enjoy. It's not as esoteric and, as some of the corporate work that you guys do.
Just so everybody knows, whenever Jared has some kind of crossover, he calls me and he's like, oh my God, tell me about this in easy to understand terms because this is so boring to me.
That's right. That's right. So no, I like the construction law world. I really do love most of my clients that, they're most of them, they're really down to earth. They're, they're contractors, they're developers. And they're just, this is what they're doing for business. And there's a lot of crossover in the activities that we like to do. Most of my clients, like me, they like to hunt, they like to fish, they like to be on the boat. They're outdoors guys. So, falling into this practice area, really suited my lifestyle and having clients that you become friends with. And inevitably when you have clients you become friends with, you do a better job for them because you care.
Yeah.
You find that right level of personalizing their problems becoming your problems. And that's what we deal with. And I think that really does go a long way.
It does. I have clients like that and they are like my favorites. I'm never going to name them. So that way everyone thinks that they're my favorite.
Right.
But I definitely see like I'm willing to make sacrifices. I'm willing to work after hours for them. Mm-hmm. There's definitely an investment that you get when you have that type of relationship. So it's cool that your whole practice area is like that. So what do you tell other small business attorneys, or not small business, but like small firm attorneys or solo attorneys who are, they have their own firms and maybe they don't have a specialty the way that you do.
Right.
Like what kind of advice do you have for them?
So, it really does come back to, I think you've got to specialize. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to find whatever your niche is going to be. But I truly do think it's the best thing that you can do for your practice. It's the best thing that you can do for your career because you want to become the guy, the girl who you go to for this. It's out of all the lawyers that I know that refer me work, it's because there is a construction problem. So they send it to me.
Yeah.
It's not just, they've got some legal problem. I'm going to send them to Jared.
What do we call that? Door law. Anything that comes through the door.
Anything that comes in the door. And I see this, whether it's, people who call me, you see the posts on Facebook that, someone has a client come in the door and it's in whatever area that they don't normally practice and they won't refer it out because they're just trying to keep the work. And, they're really doing a disservice to the client. They're really doing a disservice to themselves. Yeah. They're asking for a malpractice claim. There is
for sure.
There's just when you get into the depths of nearly every area, there's just so many nuances. You can't know them. You can't know them if it's not an area that you deal with every day. The other part of it, and again, this ties into, I will die on the hill that becoming board certified in construction law was the best thing that I've ever done for my career.
When did you get your board certification?
So I want to say it was in 2017 or 2018, somewhere in that time frame.
Okay.
Maybe it was a couple years earlier than that.
7 or 8 years. It's a long time. Longer than my marriage.
So, it just, and things that a lot of, especially younger lawyers will run into is if you're 29 years old, you don't have that inherent credibility that comes with, the gray hair, I've been doing this forever. And as you get older, you realize that doesn't really matter that much. But it's the perceived credibility when you're out there trying to market yourself, whether it's directly to clients, whether to other lawyers. But when you are board certified, all of a sudden you go from being one of the however many 100,000 lawyers in Florida to I'm one of 350 board certified lawyers in Florida in construction. You all of a sudden become, the go-to for this. And, it gives you the platform to be recognized as an expert in your area that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. I've had opportunities to, speak and teach on CLEs, and I will be on boards or on panels for like the Palm Beach County Bar or statewide stuff. And, you are not getting those gigs when you're 35 years old if you don't have some sort of inherent credibility. And all of that started with board certification.
Yeah. And I think it's something where you can actually say, like, I'm an expert in this.
Right.
Right. And not even just from the like attorney side of like being an expert that goes to court. Like you can represent to people like, I have expertise in this and here's my proof.
Right.
Right. I have this seal that says so.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot to that. And it's definitely not just prestigious, but also gives you that credibility and really like you are knowledgeable about it. For me, anytime I have a client that has a construction issue, the first name that pops to mind is Jared.
Right.
Not because we've been friends for 20 years, but because this is your specialty. You know, if it was just because you're a lawyer and you know procedure, it wouldn't be that type of question. It would just be like, hey,
Right.
what do you think this rule means?
Right.
You know, it wouldn't be, hey, I'm sending this person to you because you're an
Right.
expert.
Right.
And the other thing about it is that like I know the service that you're going to provide is top shelf, right? And that matters to me because it reflects on me when I refer
Sure.
you business. So the fact that you're board certified is like another way to like bold and underscore that.
Right. Well, you know, and that's one of the things we talk about, you know, referrals and all that. And again, this is one of those bits that, you know, I picked up along the way, just a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
And this is when I was at a big firm was, you know, you always had the young lawyers who were trying to say, well, how do I make partner? How do I get business to come in the door? And one of the things that they would preach was be a great lawyer. You have to become a great lawyer before you're really out there marketing yourself and all that. And
what does that mean? What does be a great lawyer mean?
So it is, you know, that you're competent in an area. You know, maybe you haven't specialized, but like you really are. You know what you're doing. You're not going to run the client astray. You're going to charge them a fair price. Everything that goes with, you know, kind of being someone that really handles a specific area of law and will do a good job. Because to your exact point, when I refer someone to you, that's my own reputation. I mean, I do not send. I mean, I've got other lawyer friends, and you know, we're friends. Don't get me wrong, but I'm never sending clients to them because I don't think that they're going to do a great job for that client. And not only do you want to steer, you don't want to steer that client wrong, but you don't want to put your own reputation on the line for somebody else because you know it's not going to end well.
I've had that experience. I referred business, a family friend, to an attorney. And I had the impression that this attorney was like good at their job. And they totally messed it up, totally fluffed up the whole case. And the guy got really railroaded and it was in a family law situation. And it was gut-wrenching for me because it was a family friend.
Right.
And I was also like, wow, like this is terrible. This is super bad. And I'm never referring them. But now in the eyes of the family friend, my credibility is questioned, right? Because I sent them to this person they had a bad experience with.
Right.
So that I have to do a rehab on my own reputation now, right? And so I'm very careful to make sure that my circle is tight. And it's because I choose great lawyers also.
Right.
And board certified lawyers definitely helps. So what are 3 things that people should understand about like construction law? And I mean like construction contracts or developments, like what are like the top 3 things that you think people should know about when they're either buying a home or doing construction or as a developer engaging with subs or whatever it may be?
So, I mean, the most important thing is getting your contract right. And the contract you sign matters.
Yeah.
I mean, it
repeat that. That's my tagline too.
Yeah. It truly, you know, I find it amazing when people come to me and they're having a problem on a project and they'll say, well, what do we do? And inevitably the first thing I will say is, what does your contract say?
Yeah.
Because that's it. There's not some, you know, overriding Florida law for the most part.
Right.
That's going to say, oh, here's what the parties do. It's, what does your contract say?
Yeah. And by the way, like, even if you think those terms are unfair, if you sign them, like you're stuck with them.
That's right.
Like there's no law in Florida that says the contract has to say this to make it fair. And so your feelings aren't hurt or you're not disappointed by the outcome.
Right.
Right. Like the law is you have the freedom to contract. So if you put them in there, you're stuck with them.
That's right. And, you know, and it amazes me. And it's that I certainly see it on both sides. I see it on owner side. I see it on contractor side, developer side, sub side. And they will sign contracts. And a lot of times during the course of the project, somehow those contracts go out the window. That, you know, we started and it was supposed to be a fixed cost contract, but we ran it like a cost plus job, meaning, you know, whatever it costs the contractor, they just tack on their fee. And then the fight breaks out and they go, well, what does it say? I'm like, I don't know what you guys are doing because your contract said you were going to do A. Everyone's been doing B all along.
Yeah.
What do I think a judge is going to do? I have no idea. But
because it depends. That's the thing with the law.
Right.
It depends entirely on the very specific fact in a very narrow application of the law.
That's right.
Really, and that's, I think, probably the answer to why do you need a lawyer in the construction area?
That's right. And, I would say in virtually every time that I have a lawsuit come in the door, you want to say to them, had we done the contract in the first place, we wouldn't be in this situation, or we wouldn't be fighting about X, Y, and Z because the issues would be significantly more narrow. So yeah,
which is probably why your contracts are so long.
We do our best to tailor contracts to specific projects. And again, this is on every single side, but I've got clients that do a lot of renovation work. And so they're dealing with homeowners and they don't want to hand them a 35-page contract. And I totally understand that. So, inevitably I will draft it's an 8-page, form contract. And then they go, well, can we shorten it up? Okay, well, here's what you're giving up. And you get it down to, what they want to deal with day in, day out. And again, that's really important because one of the discussions I have with them, and this is really specific to form contracts for whether it's subs, whether it's GCs, is you have to live with this contract every single day. Like it's got to work with how your office works. So if we need boxes to check, if your office staff is not able to fill in blanks, let's make it work for your business. But you got to have something.
Tough. It's tough because I have seen general contractor contracts that are like 100 pages with everything, with the schedules and this and that and the subcontractor contracts. And I get it. And I have a client, they're tech-based, and we're working on theirs. Their contract right now with their clients is like 3 pages and it's sparse. And I've rewritten it into a master service agreement that's like 15 pages. And they're like sweating a little bit. And I go, I get it. But here's all the things you're not thinking about, right? Here's all the things that if we don't talk about it now and put it in the contract, we're going to court over it, right? And if something that I really enjoy, this is a silly way to say it, but I enjoy making sure that if someone's going to break the contract, we put those terms in there. What is a material breach? Because you know this as a lawyer, summary judgment, you can't usually get it on a breach of contract because it's a fact issue. But if you've outlined specifically if this is a breach, if you fail to do this, if the delay is this many days, if you fail to pay or, and the payments are not contingent on deliverables, then you breached, I win, and that helps the client so much, right? And so I think that's something that people lose when they're looking at contracts. It's like, it can be expensive. Yeah, they can be long and it's time consuming, but it's protecting you from spending 10, 20, 50x in court.
Well, and similarly, the way that I discuss these with my clients is, let's say we're going to spend a few $1,000s in doing your form contract. How many millions of dollars in business are you going to run through that form contract? And all of a sudden, it doesn't seem so onerous.
And it doesn't seem so expensive either when you think about it. And I've had that conversation. I'm like, if this costs you 1%, 1% of what you're earning, is it worth it? Right. And you deal with multi-million-dollar projects. Your contracts do not cost 1%. It's a fraction of a percentage. But that's the point. I always say that to help kind of like reframe that conversation about value. So what do you think is a common misconception about your job? Or maybe even just like being a lawyer.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people that clients think we have a magic wand. that they come to us with a problem and we can magically fix it.
Wish I could.
I hope they understand that we all wish we could. We could, get them their money. We could get the project done. We could get it on time. But, unfortunately we work in, with several constraints, and always the first one is, what is the contract that you sign? And that's going to govern everything. We work within the constraints of, the courtroom process and how that takes years for problems to work out. I would love to get your case settled immediately, but if the other side doesn't want to do it, we get to keep litigating. I mean, that's what it is.
And do you have the wherewithal for that? You know? Like that's, I think, another common misconception is that like lawsuits take 5 minutes. Like, I love a good legal drama, but that's not real life.
That's right.
I wish it was. It's not.
That's right.
And I think that's a hard reality for a lot of people to come to terms with, because these things drag out, and it's not just financially burdensome. It's also emotionally taxing. And I recognize that as a small business owner, as someone who's had, issues where I've debated whether or not I sue, and when I bought my house, turned out that the owner had painted over mold and not disclosed any of that on the disclosures. And I'm like, do I pursue this?
Right.
Is it going to be worth it? Right. I didn't end up doing it because it wasn't going to be worth it from a cost perspective, from a time and energy perspective.
Right.
And one of the big things that I hear from clients is like, how could they do this? Right. Like, how could they fight it and say they're not responsible when they've clearly acted so badly? And I'm like, well, that's just the name of the game, you know?
That's right. And, it's funny to that point. I mean, I have, a project inevitably falls apart. And this is typically when I'm on the, representing someone on the owner's side. And once the project falls apart, they start doing their due diligence on the contractor that they selected. And they will come to me and say, oh my gosh, he was arrested for this and he has this lawsuit. And how do they let these people be contractors? So, well, it's once they go through the process, they're a contractor. And by the way, all these things that you're complaining about now were fully out there before you hired them. So, this is the person that you chose to go into business with.
So I think that's probably a part of the top 3 tips, right? So review your contract, do your due diligence on the person you're getting into business with, right?
Right.
And I mean, it's very accessible now. It is. The internet is full of things. And so what would be like the third thing? If I'm a homeowner and I want to buy a home or construct a home, what else should I be thinking about?
You have to be realistic in your expectations.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So, one of the things that we see all the time, and again, this is more on the owner side that I run into this. I will inevitably get several calls it's typically in October, this being South Florida, we've got the big snowbird population, and people will try to renovate their houses, their condos when they're away for the season. And so what they do is they sign a contract. They don't come to us in the first place. They sign a contract and they leave just a giant deposit for the contractor when they leave in April or May. Mm-hmm. And they think they're going to show up in October with their project done.
Like perfectly finished turnkey home.
Exactly. And it almost never happens. It's just, it's Florida, and I often hear, they're snowbirds. So, well, in New Jersey, this would never happen. In Illinois, this would never happen. Okay, well, it's Florida.
You didn't do the contract there. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
So that's it's inevitably, it seems like every, the start of every season, we get those calls. But also, I see this on an ongoing basis too with some of our bigger projects. Some of the houses that we do that are, $10, $15 million projects, and they will run into issues with, the project not going along, the cost getting out of control. And again, they have, through the course of the project, they've just been sending checks and they don't have anyone that's necessarily on their side. So, one of my biggest things that I advocate for when I'm representing owners and we're getting the project started is you've got to have an owner's rep. Which is, a term of art. We've got them down here. It's somebody who is a contractor, who's knowledgeable in construction, who's going to visit the project whether it's every week, every 2 weeks. And
I didn't know this was a thing.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's very,
So you hire someone to be like your agent.
Exactly right. And that person is making sure that the construction is moving along. They're working, hand in hand with the contractor to make sure that the right materials are getting ordered, that the work is getting done right. And they're looking at your payment applications to make sure, hey, contractor billed me for, plumbing being 25% done or plumbing being done, roughed in, and it's not really roughed in. And so we see this with you can hire an owner's rep to do it. If you can hire an architect as, to provide what we call construction administration services. Okay. And they're looking at all that stuff. And those guys, they're just invaluable. It's, again, it's almost like going back to, you're going to spend X to have a good contract in place. If you're spending $12 million to build a house,
it's worth the investment.
Yeah. Paying the architect to stay on top of the contractor, paying an owner's rep to stay on top of the project. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah. It's a form of insurance, I think. But I do think it's important for people to know in the public, and we could spend another hour talking about this point. those owners reps are licensed with the state.
Correct.
They're licensed contractors, licensed architects.
Right.
Because you can't provide construction management services unlicensed. Danielle can't just show up and be like, I'm going to do this because I like it.
Right.
I like to design sets in, a podcast studio. Now I can do that in homes. Now I can go be an owner's rep. No, absolutely not. You need to be licensed.
Right. And that's one of the first things that we check when either we're doing contracts or, new client is the contractor properly licensed to do the job? Because, we're not going to get into the deep dive of the state of the law, but it's really clear in Florida that if you're acting as a contractor and you're not a licensed contractor, your contract is unenforceable. So,
right. Meaning that if you're an unlicensed contractor and you're owed money, you can't sue for it.
Correct.
Because you should have never been eligible to get it in the first place.
Right. And not only that, but they can make you pay back everything that they've paid you already. So, it really, when you get to that unlicensed contractor bit, it's a really powerful tool for an owner and something that everybody needs to be aware of.
Absolutely. So here's a good question for you. What do you think makes you successful?
Oh, that's a loaded question. No, I mean, I think that it all boils down to hard work. I mean, it really does. It's doing right by your clients. It's being fair with your clients. Your reputation is everything. So with whether it's, your opposing counsel on one case becomes your co-counsel on another case, becomes a referral source on another case.
That actually has happened to me. One of my opposing counsels, my first, has been a co-counsel with me on a very complex matter for the last couple of years.
I mean, it's just that becomes your calling card. So, if you get this reputation of that, you're lazy, you file things late, you're not responsive, that's something that you've got to carry with you, and that becomes your brand. And so,
so you want a hard worker as your brand.
That's what it is.
So that's what your success is. I can see that. I definitely would always associate hard work with you. I've never not seen you work hard. I mean, maybe on the fishing trips, but whatever. I think for me, in addition to all those things, but I think the thing that jumps out is I'm successful because I have a delusional level of confidence. I have always had that level. I think someone told me fake it till you make it when I was 10, and I just took it to heart. And I've always walked into a room just delusionally confident, faking it. Nobody has any idea that I have no idea what I'm doing there, but I just absorb information from everybody.
Right.
And I take that and I funnel it into the hard work. Right. I will stay up as late as I need to. I often will, if I'm navigating an area that I'm just not entirely familiar with, that's come up in the scope of business litigation, right? The things that I do all the time, but maybe it's a nuance I've never come across.
Right.
I'll research for sometimes even days.
Right.
And I'm not billing the client that time. That's me time. That's me learning.
That's right.
And I'm putting in that time in those hours. And I think that's what people know about me. My clients recognize that too. And I think that's what makes me successful. But
absolutely.
That comes down to what you said, hard work.
And it's funny. I have one of my old partners who taught me a lot. A really, really great guy. But he said to me when I was going through, the board certification process and this and that, and he was a couple years ahead of me, and he said, there is going to be a point in your career where you realize you know more than everybody else in the room. And it doesn't matter that this guy's 65 and he's been doing it for 30 years, and it doesn't matter. And you're going to have that light bulb go off, and that's when you kind of can take over the room. And all of a sudden, your career kind of really does take off because you realize what you've accomplished and what you can bring to the table. And you don't have a problem saying to, the guy, well, this is the way it's always been done. Yeah, but here's what the law says. And the clients appreciate that confidence, and they go, oh my God, my guy's the guy.
Yeah. And it's no longer delusional confidence. It's actual confidence grounded in something,
Right.
And I definitely have had moments like that recently. And I think those are the cool moments. Sometimes when you and I both in our own practices, we get so busy.
Right.
And it can be so overwhelming. And you're like, oh my God, I have deadlines. But you're a dad. You have 2 kids. You have kids who are very active in their extracurriculars. And you're like, I'm trying to manage all this stuff and be everything to everybody. And is it enough? Am I doing the right thing? You get caught up, but then you're like, wow, I really I do know what I'm doing. And it feels so good to be able to have that moment.
Right. For sure. And it's funny, there is definitely that element of balance to it. And that it's hard. I mean, you've got a little boy, I've got 2 kids. And, my one of my jokes about, work-life balance is, you've got the scales here and you put, one chip in the work side and you put another one in the personal side and it stays balanced. It just gets heavy. But, it's, you learn how to deal with all of it. And
well, that's actually leading into my next question, which is like, how do you navigate the complexity of being a business owner, a lawyer, a dad, a friend? Like, how do you navigate that? And, I hate using the word balance because I don't think there is real balance ever in anyone's lives. I juggle things, right? But like, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to say it, but it's almost like there's no off days. And it's hard to do, but the days of lounging around on the couch, those are just, they don't exist.
Don't.
No, they don't. But you want to try to do everything and be everything to everyone that you need to be. And you can do that. But again, it goes back to, it just takes a lot of hard work that, I can remember, being on a panel, something for the Palm Beach County Bar. And I don't even remember what the panel was at this point, but my son had a baseball game at the exact same time. I couldn't move the baseball game. I couldn't move the panel. But I wanted to do both. And, there I was on a Zoom from like behind the dugout on a panel with a bunch of other lawyers, and you hear the crack of the bat in the back, and someone says like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm at my son's baseball game," but here we are doing this.
Sometimes that's what balance looks like. I mean,
right. Sometimes
for me, balance is like I'm doing bath time with my son and my shopping list for the grocery store.
Right.
Sometimes it's I'm sitting in the waiting room for whatever appointment and I'm answering emails because that's the only time I've had that day to do that.
That's right. That's right.
And that's, life is complex. And
it is, and one of the things I've learned, and, I'm sure my dad will see this at some point. You know my dad well. That's where a lot of the always doing something comes in. And, a lot of people will give him a hard time and I'll get a hard time for it. Like, he may be duck hunting on Tuesday or I may be fishing on a Wednesday, but Saturday and Sunday I'm in the office. Like, so if you don't have, something else that needs to go on, you're working. And it doesn't matter that it's Saturday or Sunday. And that's, that's the way you find balance in your own life is, you want to do everything. Well, find the time to do it. I always joke, I know some lawyers, and this kind of circles back to something that we've talked about, solo lawyers, and they'll text me at 3:00 on a Wednesday, and they're at the beach, they're at the pool, and I'm like, what are you doing? But I don't know what else they're doing. Maybe that's how it works for them. But me personally, if I'm not at the baseball fields watching my daughter cheer, if I'm not on the boat doing something like that, I'm working. And
to your credit, sometimes even when you're on the boat, you're working, because you called me like while you're on the way to the Bahamas and you're like, hey, I'm in the middle of this. I need some help because I can't bust out a laptop.
Right.
Can you write this up for me?
Right.
So, always be working is something that can be incorporated into like taking the breaks.
Right.
But, I think the measure of success isn't going to come without putting in that time. It's not just going to, there's so many of us that are fortunate that like the business rolls in through referrals, or sometimes it feels like magic.
Right.
But that's not the commonality. That's not normal, really.
Well, I mean, that's just, that's what appears to the outside. And, it's the old, be like a duck, right? Like everyone sees you calm on the surface and they don't see your feet kicking away underneath the surface. Just kind of another story to this point is, I remember this must have been a year or two ago, and I was, going on a hunting trip, and I was meeting some friends down in South Texas, and I had flown into Dallas, and I was driving down there with my dad, and it was, a Thursday, like it was, some normal day, and we've got 10 hours in the truck, and he and I both essentially took turns being on client calls for that entire 10 hours because that's what you've got to deal with, and he's on the phone, and then I'm on the phone, and back and forth and back. And, you work the entire way down. And again, like, what can you do with the time that you have, right? So, you understand that if you're sitting in the truck, you're not going to be able to work on a brief. That's not realistic. But, it comes down to managing your schedules. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I'm going to set a bunch of calls for all of this truck time that I have.
Yeah, I drive to Texas every year, and it's like a 2-week trip between like the travel time and then the time we spend there. And that's exactly what I do, because I think the mentality of like, we always have to be working is not like in the sense of like, you have to work or else, right? But it's what's being productive to continue to set things in motion so that you don't have those lean times, right? So that like the work does continue to come in and like that you are staying on top of it. So for me, I do the same thing. I'm like, if I'm going to be in the car, even now, if I have to drive from my house to court in West Palm, I am scheduling a call. Whether it's a call with you to follow up about something with a case or a client or an opposing counsel, I am using that time. Because otherwise, to me, it's wasted time. And I'm sure my therapist would be like, you could just decompress and like take deep breaths and like be mindful. Like, but that is me being mindful because I'm taking care of myself by getting those things out of the way so I don't stress about them later. And in turn, like that is the wheel, right? Like I am putting in the work. People know that I'm showing up, my clients, my opposing counsel, and that is setting my reputation. So I think to wrap this up, I have one question left. What do you hope that your clients and colleagues will remember you for? Like my brother used to say this to me, like in 10 years from now, what's the story you want to tell your children? So I guess the question is really like, what is the story that's going to be told about you?
You know, I really think it's that I was there 100% for them. I did my best for them and I did right by them. I mean, that's really what it is. It's you showed up, you worked hard, you did the best that you could. And, you know, I hope my clients feel that way. I hope my kids feel that way. You know,
I mean, they better feel that way. And I'm speaking about your kids for sure. If y'all are listening, okay. Yeah, no, I think that that's pretty accurate. I know that. I mean, you and I have been friends for over 20 years. Honestly, that's one of the few friendships in my life that have been that long. You have seen me and I've seen you through all versions of each other, and we are still here. And it's funny because I don't even remember how we met, honestly.
I do. I was actually thinking about it this morning.
Okay.
So
this is a surprise story for me.
Yeah, I was thinking about it this morning as I was getting ready because we've talked about this before. I don't even remember how we met, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. So we were in, I want to say it was my junior year, your sophomore year. We ended up in a legal writing class together.
Okay.
It satisfied some English credit, and we were sitting there, or I was sitting there, and I was talking with another friend of mine who ended up being, you know, we both ended up being friends with, but we were just chatting before the class started. And you walked up and you were like, you guys seem nice. I'm going to be friends with you. And off we went.
There's that delusional confidence.
But do you remember this?
I do now. Yes. That is how I used to make friends with people.
Yeah.
Because I was always the girl that like had such jitters before the first day of class that I was like, you know what? I'm going to fuel that. And I'm just going to walk up to someone and be like, you're my friend now.
You did. That is 100% what you did. And so that would have been in 2004? 2003, I was going to say. Yeah.
Okay, 2003. Wow. So it's longer than that, 22 years. 22 years, Jared. We made it. Well, thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been super fun. Honestly, your honesty and your insight is so valuable, and it was really a great conversation. And that's what this podcast is about. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. And if you want to learn more about me, you can find it at www.dudai.legal. I am Danielle Dudai, and this was a Dudai Legal production. Thank you.